Rejoice, ladies and gentlemen. It's time once again to talk games with the E2KG crew. I am hosting tonight. I'm Swiss Guard, and this is episode 82 of the Enough to Keep Going GX show. The GX show is the gamer experience show, and I'm joined by, we will be joined eventually by three experienced gamers ready to analyze, criticize, and analyze games new and old. First up is Osiris Prime. How are you doing, Prime?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Awesome. And he's staying warm, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less.
Yeah.
Has the weather improved any up in Chicagoland?
It has. Yeah, it has. It's been in like in the 30s, so it's not too bad. Low to mid 30s.
That's balmy.
That's right. It's shorts weather.
Yeah. Next up, DBQ Hams. DB's also trying to stay warm, but it sounds like they're having a heat wave up there. So.
Yeah, what I'm trying to figure out though is what was the third thing? Analyze, criticize, and did you say analyze again?
No, I said idolize, but
idolize. Okay, that's good. See,
yeah, I was trying to do something positive, but I guess like my mouth didn't want to like present anything positive. It's just against my nature, my fundamental nature.
The syllables just got caught in the beard, so that is okay.
Eventually, he's not ready yet, but soon we will be joined by the man of 1,000 podcasts, Agasicles Stamus. But and I trust everything's well with him as usual. Like, I mean, he's pretty much got a show every night. But all right, so let's just it's E2KG, so we're gonna go past the time, so we might as well get started talking games as soon as possible. Pix Plays 2 weeks ago was right on the heels of the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 from Square Enix, and we put the notice out asking if any hosts were picking the game up, and it was crickets. So, and not Jiminy Cricket. So that kind of got us thinking about why, and of course, you know, you have a Byzantine labyrinth of lore and characters and everything that it's pretty much it's a pretty significant barrier to entry, even for some of us that have played some of the games, a few of the games in the past. So on the theme of that sprung us onto the theme of lore. And while we're not going to have games lined up that have super deep, crazy anime style labyrinths of lore, we do have some interesting games coming up. DB actually took this opportunity to take a game that wants to be lore dependent and is pretty recent, and they're looking for that to be kind of a hook. You chose to play Anthem.
Yeah, right, and we'll talk more about the actual game aspect of Anthem later in our playlist. But yeah, I mean, right, this is a BioWare game. This was the hook, the where BioWare was hanging their hat on the games as service model was that they could come at it from the storytelling lore aspect of it. So yeah, I dove into it, spent a lot of time kind of digging through the codex. Picked up the Anthem comic book that released last week, which it's a first of many parts, and it kind of a prequel to one of the characters that you'll meet in the game. As a comic book, it's kind of a missed opportunity, probably, I would say, in terms of creating more lore, that it opts to tell a more personal story and give us a little bit of inner workings of people rather than the world. But it also does some things related to the world. It explains some of the creatures that you end up encountering throughout the game, and you know, the fact that they're made up of 1,000 little creatures, or that they don't actually have they're born of the cataclysm events that happen around the world. So yeah, there is a lot of of lore within Anthem, and I think one of the themes. There's plenty of themes to talk about within the reviews related to Anthem, but I think one of the themes there is that BioWare does actually create a rich world. Whether or not the story of the game of Anthem is worthwhile is a different question, but the world that they create and the lore created around it creates a lot of potential. Whether it's the idea between the history of the Dominion and the roles that freelancers played in terms of that's who your character is, but also the Urgoth, who were, again, this happens on a planet that is not Earth. The Urgoth were the people that kind of ruled over the humans at one point in time, but don't necessarily seem to show up in the story at this point. But there's a lot of components. The Bastion is the world, or potentially just the country where the story of Anthem takes place, which means there's a lot more going on there, or the potential for it to go on in terms of a larger world that future games or media could explore. Right? It's BioWare. There's been books around Dragon Age. There's been books around Mass Effect. So there's lots of potential there. You were going to cut me off. So please do stop me before I continue to dive down my rabbit hole.
You've been saying potential a lot. So
yes,
the lore. I know we're going to get into the potential of the game itself, but from the lore perspective, does it generate interest? Is it depth, or is it just kind of a shallow set of loose ends that you think could lead somewhere?
No, I think that there's a lot of potential for storytelling within the world that they create, right? They create this world where there are, great MacGuffins of the Anthem of creation that are left behind, that can do all kinds of things just because of reasons. So there is the potential to modify the world, to have random events happen, to have gravity or other laws of physics broken. That there's the potential of lots of different species. I think the lore aspect of this is in some ways not as, maybe for me, not as compelling as something like Mass Effect, where it is grounded in, this is the humanity that we know in the far future as we discover a Promethean relic, at some point in time that launches us into the rest of the galaxy. It's not actually a Promethean relic. So if you want to go down that hole, that's a different piece there. But it has the potential of lots of stories, right? But I also think, I'm the guy with the Destiny, grimoire book, or the Halo mythology book, right? I mean, I think that there's lots of potential for good stories that exist outside of a video game by the nature of what's being created.
I didn't know you had that grimoire book there. That's pretty nice.
Yeah. Oh my God. So this is. I had some time to read through it. Right. When I thought that somebody was going to cover Destiny as a lore place. Right. Again, Destiny is a good example of someplace with some deep lore, without necessarily a strong story to always go with it. But it is. It's a really interesting piece. It's the combination of some of the grimoire and some other stuff. So, but I think another aspect, the other book that I have, and I had, this is just one of multiple series, right? These are the Witcher books that operate within the world of the Witcher and open up a whole lot of potential of lore. And Swiss, that's the game that you chose was The Witcher, correct?
Yeah, it's been a couple of months since I played the original Witcher on PC, so I figured I'd try to pick up. It was a good excuse for me to try and pick it back up, play some of the quests, but with a focus on the lore aspect. And actually, me picking up where I'm at was a really good place for that, because I'm really starting to get into the political intrigue and whatnot in earnest. So a lot of what I've found in The Witcher, they have like literally like one of the shopkeepers in the temple quarter is a bookseller, and you can go in there and purchase books and scrolls, and you get little snippets of this is how you hunt whatever, like drown dead. You have to do some of those in order to get certain materials back when you slay monsters. But they also have some that are much more optional that just do world building, and this is the state of how elves and dwarves are perceived, and there was this revolution and that, and a lot of the game is Geralt attempting to overcome his amnesia and kind of rediscover his identity. That's kind of one of the themes in it. And one of the, because I was focused on the lore aspect, I did start digging through some of the additional books that I found, and I found a discussion on how Geralt, was perceived to have died, and like the events surrounding when Geralt, the famous Witcher, was killed in the last war or something. So it did, I think, draw me in. They have little stories about, okay, this group practices this religion. You can find a book on like the history of that. I like when it feels like the developers take the time to try to make you feel like you're placed in a world instead of just, okay, I'm looking at this diorama, essentially. Like, you don't feel narrow. But an RPG is an excellent platform for that. You're talking BioWare. I know Anthem isn't really an RPG like the classic BioWare sense, but The Witcher's classic RPG, like a classic Western RPG. And while the temptation exists to avoid the lore entirely, and you can as much as the game lets you, given the genre, I don't mind settling in and kind of letting it draw me in, because that's part of the experience. With as opposed to a game like what Prime was playing, where the lore is pretty much window dressing, I guess you could say. You took this as an excuse to play Smash Brothers.
Yes, I took the easy way out this time because I guess I had a few games I probably could have gone through, like Destiny, Destiny 2, even Skyrim to some extent, because there's like, you can just go down the rabbit hole in that game, but we'll save that for later. Yeah, so I picked Smash, not so much for the lore as, there's a big, grandiose storyline or anything, but obviously there's just, an ungodly amount of characters that you can choose from. You can do, obviously, you got the Mario characters, Mario, Luigi, Princess. You have other characters from, Nintendo, Zelda, and you have a bunch of Pokemon. Actually, quite a few Pokemon. Then you got like Snake from Metal Gear, and you got Sonic, and you have Pac-Man, and you have all these characters, Mega Man. So I was looking more of just this melting pot of not only characters, but there's a lot of modes too that you can go through in Smash Brothers. So obviously, I've been playing World of Light. I've talked about that, going back and forth between the regular World of Light kind of adventure mode and just where you kind of fight to unlock the different stickers, our guys. So I did a little bit of that because I had been doing that for a while, so I didn't want to stay too long with that. But one mode I was trying to go through was Classic mode, which you go through each. You can go through each character. I only did a couple of characters so far, and it basically, you run through. I think it's about maybe 8 to 10. Well, maybe not even that much. I'd say 6 to 8 fights or so, maybe. I think it depends where you start to, because it is kind of this tapestry of like all the characters, and you can. It's basically kind of like the easy, medium, and hard levels, so you can kind of move the little pointer to where you want to start. So I was doing that. I started like pretty much the medium side, and it was kind of running through that, but it kind of tailors for each character. So I started with Luigi the first time, and I just basically fought a bunch of Mario themed fighters, and so I think a couple of them just regular other Nintendo characters like Zelda and stuff like that. But at the end, I fight Bowser, And the same thing with Mario. I went through with Mario, and there's a Bowser boss fight at the end. And it does that for each character. It kind of runs through their gambit of characters, or kind of characters if they don't have that many, and you can do that. So it's kind of cool. And then there's some mini modes that you can do within that mode. Like right before the boss, there's kind of like a I don't want to say an endless runner, but it's a timed kind of running, from left to right, and there's a bunch of coins you can get to get points and stuff, and rack up your coins that you collect throughout the game. So that was kind of cool. And then at the very end, if you beat the boss, as the credits are going, and I think they've done this in other Smash games. There's kind of like what do they call them? Like those shmups where you're kind of just shooting all the credits and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. And I don't know if you get like points at the end of that too. So I don't know if there's anything other than just the points and coins you get for that. I don't know. Maybe just a high score, I suppose. But it's just kind of cool.
So the teacher in me wants to ask you a question related to the actual assignment, and not just the story that you are telling related to playing Smash Brothers.
Yes.
So in the lore aspect, was there, going back to World of Light, there's a ton of kind of off-brand side shoot one-shot characters that are spirits in there. Have any of those, as you've unlocked things, have they caused you to go back and do a Google search about who the heck they actually are, or what game they're actually from, or has it caused you to go down any, as Swiss was talking about, diving into the published material within the game, has it caused you to go outside the game a little bit to find out more about any of those characters?
I haven't really. It's kind of weird because it's either I know, like I totally know the character, or I was like I have no idea who this person even is. And yeah, I could have done that, but I have such limited time that when I'm playing, I just kind of just want to play the game and not kind of go off in that tangent like at that point. So no, unfortunately, I haven't really done that. There's just been characters though that I've seen throughout that. Throughout the World of Light, where it's like, oh, that kind of looks familiar, and I kind of want to, I do want to go back and look at it, but I just don't have the time right now. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, where it doesn't seem like it doesn't go into details like it used to when you get the little, I think there were trophies before instead of stickers, where you can go into a mode and flip around the character, and then you can flip the screen, and it has like a little card, paragraph or two of what the character is and stuff like that. So not that I've seen, at least as far as I've kind of been poking around at the game, but I kind of miss that, because it was kind of cool to go back and do it right there in the game, and not do this first Destiny game where he had to go outside the game to go and look at all that stuff. So I don't know, maybe that's just laziness in me, but that's just about how I feel about that part.
One additional question to follow up. While you may not have investigated, just seeing all those characters, and for the games that you're familiar with and the characters that you're familiar with, you have kind of the lore filed away in your brain cells. Has it caused you to want to go back and revisit any games that you may not have played in a long time?
I would say when I not necessarily when I was for those stickers, but so just some of the characters themselves, like Ice Climbers. Like there's an Ice Climber game in I think it's the NES Classic. I remember actually, or maybe it would have been NES Classic. I actually went back and played just because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot Ice Climbers was in Smash Brothers, so I went back and played that on the Classic just because it was right there in my living room, so it was easy access. So I've done stuff like that. I wish I had some I know there's Mega Man games that you can, there's a lot you can buy right now. There's all kind of classics, collections, and there's Mega Man. I think 11 was the last one that came out. I'm probably gonna wait for a sale to come out, like a really good sale, and then I'll probably jump on that. So, but other than that, there's like nothing I can think of offhand that like made me or wanted me to go run out and get it. Except for maybe like Fire Emblem. I kind of want to play the new one when it comes out, Three Houses. So kind of future. It's making me think of the future or stuff I want to buy.
The Nintendo has succeeded.
That's right. Look at me. And also, hello, Agasicles.
Agasicles just joined us. We're finishing up our PixPlays report outs. So, Agasicles, it looks like you played like DB, you played a very recent game, Red Dead Redemption 2. So we can get into more like your experience overall playing the game later in the show, but from a perspective of lore and characters, how did that Red Dead session fare for you?
Yeah, it was fairly interesting. Are you guys getting my audio?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you.
I hear
Yeah,
you.
for some reason it's just not auto switching my camera. So I played about probably 8 to 9 hours of it, and went off into the Wikipedia entry on it, since I never played Red Dead Redemption 1, and kind of crawled through some of that, now having like 10 to 12 hours of the game behind me, and having some connective tissue to, things that that it talked about in the Red Dead Redemption OG write-up. I thought it was fairly interesting, just in terms of the characters that survived this initial, the prequel, basically, to move on and be presented to you in what was actually the follow-on story, but the first game. So it's just very interesting that, the first game culminates with you, in a final battle with Dutch, who is the leader of the gang in Red Dead Redemption 2. That interesting enough, a character who I'm locked away from for some reason right now, which is a frustrating aspect of the game, actually figures prominently. I can't remember. I think Jose Escuela figures prominently in the first game, and I think there was one other character that stuck out to me. But also, it's also very particular to the time. Also, I think in a way that's a little different than video games normally are. And there's some show that I've been watching recently that I can't put my finger on it, but what starkly stuck out to me in playing through Red Dead Redemption 2 is how life is just treated with such little value that a man can be hung for a pretty innocuous offense. And so this whole menagerie of what it rang out to me in reading the lore is it more so firmly steeped me in the period of time, in kind of the quick and the dead kind of aspect, where there's this whole menagerie of characters, but really their lives were of such little value, right? And like many characters die. I was actually really surprised that you re-encountered Dutch in the first game. But so many of these characters just like transit through and wind up dead, very frequently off of very, non-grandiose endings in a lot of ways. And then seeing that you're presented, that Marsden, having grown up in this gang in the first game, goes on and kind of just migrates into a new group of friends who also, many of which meet their demise for non-grandiose reasons, just kind of rang out to me as part of the period piece aspect of Red Dead Redemption, the franchise in all.
So did the lore aspect, it sounds like you were interested in now the time period, right? Which some of the criticism of the game, I think, is trying to be too faithful to the time period and not gamey enough, so to speak. Did focusing on lore and setting enhance your experience of the game?
Man, that's tough. So one of the conversations I've been having with some other people and kind of introspecting a lot about is this balance in games between mechanics versus story. In a time where we have things of such stark contrast, like these battle royale games, which have no story and are entirely mechanical, and therefore, in my mind, only represents a certain shallow depth of design, versus things like Red Dead Redemption 2, which are very heavily story oriented. The answer to your question is a bit it enhanced. So if I split the game into two different starkly different domains, right? It did enhance my awareness and enjoyment of the story, as far as, you know, me being a person who really likes things that are highly detailed and are kind of world building, not to the Game of Thrones extent, but something like this, where there's the idea of a pedigree, of and a network of characters. Yes, it did not overall increase my enjoyment of the game, because my problems with the game are very much that mechanical piece of it.
So did anybody go ahead, DB, do you have a question?
No, I was gonna dive into the mechanical piece because I'm curious, but go ahead. I want to see where you take this first.
Oh, I was just going to ask, did anybody have like a negative experience with the lore? Or do we just choose some games that happen to, you know, that plays to those games' strengths?
I mean, I'll say from my perspective, I happened to land on a game. I mean, that Wikipedia write-up is only like 3 to 5 paragraphs, and the lore from that aspect is fairly compact. What Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't do a lot of is there's not a ton of character to like the townships, and geographic features, which there could have been a lot of that. There could have been a lot of like rocks and trees and, you know, landscapes and pieces that were very specific to the game and the setting. And there could have been a lot of world building in the towns, but there's really not. What I will say is I deliberately didn't get into something like a Final Fantasy kind of game where I know that the lore would have driven me frippin' batty, right? And I guess I'm a little surprised. I mean, Prime, which I guess what's weird to me is that for the upcoming assignment, you're looking at Elder Scrolls, which is super lore heavy. And again, maybe if we talk a little bit about Sunless Skies, right? There's a ton of lore that's a lot of reading, and I like that probably would have tipped me over the edge as well, and potentially been a negative experience. But I didn't hit that with Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, that's why I didn't pick it for this one, because you can go like way like when I first started. I'll talk about it later. But as far as my negativity, I kind of talked about it earlier. How you had to kind of for Smash Brothers, you had to kind of search for it like outside of the game. It wasn't in the game. So I mean, that's about the only negative thing for me. DB, any negatives?
So I think the negative is that the lore is relatively young for Anthem and the world building piece. Like, you know, when I've dove into other BioWare games, I've come at them at a time when there's been other media out there to accompany it, right? Whether it's comics or books, that there's even the launch leading up to Mass Effect Andromeda had a pretty cool book that came out with it that described what happened on the space station before you got there, right? I mean, so there is, again, let's go back to that potential aspect. I'm going to come back to that word multiple times, I'm sure. But for me, the lore aspect of Andromeda is, I couldn't go to a Wikipedia page, or I tried. I you know, looking up the characters in the comic, trying to figure out who more they were. You know, there's a little bit there because of the game being out, but there's not kind of those deep threads yet. So it's kind of, I'm reading the book as it's being written, and there's some interest in that, but it also, the hooks that it has the potential to grab onto you are limited because of the nature of it not being fully developed yet.
All right. I'm eager to expand on both Red Dead Redemption 2 and Anthem into taking the lore into the actual gameplay and looking at it as a cohesive piece of art rather than just an interactive story. So I know, Agascles, you have World in Conflict as your first game, but do you mind, while we're kind of here, talking a little bit more about your Red Dead experience?
Yeah, no, not at all. You're host, so it's your call. This is probably not going to be a pleasant conversation, and it's the type of thing which, even encountering gamers, as I've talked a lot over the weekend about Anthem, which I've observed, you know, from an observational position, and the market, but also a lot about Red Dead Redemption 2, which I've been immersed in over the weekend, kind of drives gamers batty because apparently there are lots of gamers who don't like to hear anybody talk badly about a game. But I'm like, I'm sorry if a game has problems, then that's what we talk about, right? So none of us have ever chosen to come to be part of this forum to just praise games simply because they were completed and shipped. And completion and being completed is a loose term as it is. So Red Dead Redemption 2, so I'll just start running through my big list of problems rather than kind of do a whole monologue about the overall experience. So it's GTA, right? It's GTA in the Old West, and it brings with it all of the baggage that game engine and that physics model have along with it. Hit detection, collision detection for certain actions is very frustrating. So you have to hitch your horse, or else your horse will run or walk away. There's a very small span within which you get that control presented. There's like 5 layers of depth of context in the control scheme. That is also a key part of the problem. So certain control things are only accessible when you are in certain contexts of the game. So you have the hitch thing where if you miss the hitch command come up, you'll just swing through the arc if you're kind of turning your avatar around. And there are other things that you just completely miss it, and then you'll wind up sitting there just trying to tweak the controller to get the person into just the right position for that control to present itself again, so that you can actually hit it. The depth of context, one of the foremost things that frustrates me is weapons management, because what you have to do is you have to go into the weapons wheel, and like in one slot, I have 4 different weapons. I have like the shotgun, some other rifle, the bow, and like something else. You have to be able to access that menu to queue up which of those you want to actually draw, and be at the ready when you're cycling through weapons. And that thing, like there's a point where it presents itself when you are walking up to the horse, and then there's a point where then, like but if you get on the horse and you're in the camp, then that weapon switching context wheel will not come up. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me that I can manage weapons when I'm off the horse standing right next to it. But once I get on the horse, I can't access it until I get out of the camp, and then I can access it again. So there's this several design elements where there's this frustrating, like you can do a thing, then you can't access a thing, and then you can do a thing. Moving around when you're in camp, one of my big issues is that you can't run. So like on Destiny, when you're in the tower, you can still run. But you can't run when you're in the camp in Red Dead. So going around and talking to people becomes this very ponderous, burgeoning mechanic of like really taking a long time to physically get from a tent to a tent on the other side of the camp to talk to a person. And then there's this janky invisible barrier around the inner core perimeter of the camp. And as soon as you break past that barrier perimeter, suddenly you can run again. So if you can walk quickly, it's literally like a half step faster than your normal walking gait. But if you just get accustomed to holding down the A button, what will happen is you will be at a dead sprint coming into camp, and then he'll just pull up and start walking. And then if you hit that invisible perimeter, which you never know when you're going to hit it, he takes off sprinting again. So there's a lot of that. I think the final thing I think that I have right at the top of my list is there's also this frustrating thing where you're going to a mission, you enter a waypoint on the map, which I don't remember them ever teaching you how to use the map. They teach you how to do all sorts of dumb stuff like patting your horse. I don't remember them ever training you to use the map to select missions, which is the entire way that you have to play the game. So you open up the map, you go to an area where there's a mission, yellow pip presented. You can hit a waypoint on that so you know how to navigate the horse to it. Once you get into the mission area, typically the markers will then move. Now, there's no forewarning on when this happens. You just have to remember that once you're in the mission area, to keep checking the map to see when the context pips move. And typically, you'll get like a target marker, which is a red X, but often you'll get a very, very, very tiny yellow pip, which indicates that it's a mission waypoint, but it's not your actual target. Sometimes you will get both of these, and sometimes you will get multiple ones of these. So it's this whole, I transit into the mission area, and then as soon as I get into the mission area, everything scatters and where I'm supposed to go suddenly changes. So that's problematic. And the last thing I guess I'll mention, I thought I was on the last thing, was, like I mentioned, going to talk to Jose Escuela. For some reason, I guess because of crime, because I was reported for a crime in that area, I now can't access that character. The first time that happens, again, they don't train you on that at all. I literally spent 15 to 20 minutes riding my horse to the entire other side of the map to get to this area. And I mean, I got killed, I think, once or twice going over there because people were after me for the bounty. I actually had to not follow the charted path, which always takes you down like main roads. I actually had to figure out to navigate down to the beach of a riverbed and find a place to ford the river so that I would be off of the main path so I wouldn't get seen. A lot of work figuring this out. Get to the thing, and then it tells me that the mission's not accessible. Again, the first time that happens, they haven't trained you, they haven't warned you. I blew like a 30-minute window on that. But again, they train you how to do other silly stuff that I'm like, I think I could have figured out how to shoot a rabbit with a bow and arrow without being on an idiotic tutorial mission for that. I would have preferred that they would have given me all these warnings about like how to use the map and what keeps you from accessing a mission.
So the when you get to the area and it kind of gives you like the final target and the waypoints, are you required to hit the waypoints before you get to the final target?
I want to say in general, yes. I think generally the setup, if it does present them to you at the same time, is usually that tiny yellow pip. There's like a piece of information or maybe a helpful like tool or weapon or something like that.
So they present everything, but they're like, by the way, these are prerequisites.
Yeah, it's in my mind, and I may not be super accurate on this. It can be different with different missions. So I can distinctly remember times where there was a yellow pip, just a yellow pip, and you had to go to that first, and then it eventually gave you that red X for the target. I can specifically remember a time where there was a yellow pip and there was a target. So you could go to the yellow pip to ask some questions of some people and maybe get more information, or you could have just gone like straight to the target. So it's just a little highly non-deterministic, I think, is the main issue. I think my overall statement is, at the end of the day, the mission structure of the game is a bunch of contextual controls that eventually degenerate into a series of QuickTime events or faux QuickTime events to culminate the mission. And you do that over and over and over and over again. Like to me, I haven't gotten to a point where there's like a set mission structure where, like in Far Cry 5, right? There's lots of different areas to take over that present a different tactical situation, but at the end of the day, it's all the same, and it's a puzzle for you to decide how you want to approach. In Red Dead Redemption 2, almost every mission at some point they give you like a very specific, you need to press this button to make this happen, and it's not a rote event. It's not a routine. It's not part of your menagerie of skills that you have normally. It is something that is very specific to that situation and context.
So for those following along within E2KG lore, the last time we talked about Red Dead was on our superlative show, as it showed up as a disappointment of the year. The way you're describing it, Agasicles, I don't know that it has changed from that, right? Is it still ending up being a disappointment in terms of design at this stage? The way you're talking about some of the mechanics and how they message it, or the failure of building in structures so that it teaches you that, kind of whether dynamically within the game or kind of overtly within a tutorial mission. So does it feel like we're still kind of in that, it could be more type of game?
Yeah, I mean, where I land with it is in perhaps apropos is it's highly situational and contextual how I feel about it, which is a lot of different ways. Like I wish we were, and probably part of the realization I'm coming to is that the four of us are probably not normal gamers. I think maybe a decade to 20 years ago we were, but now we're not. I wish I was a normal gamer and this were a game, and it's how I would recommend other people approach the game. I wish I was a normal gamer and I picked up this game, for 20 or 30 bucks and just played it at my leisure. For us, I still feel it's an important game in the terms of where the art is going and where design is going, and I think we had to experience that firsthand. It is a very disappointing and dissatisfying game mechanically for me. It doesn't feel good like Destiny. It doesn't even feel good like Crisis, right? Where you feel like a superhero with a lot of different skills. It doesn't feel good like Far Cry 5, where I get a bunch of tactical situations and I can untie that knot however I see fit. It's very uncomfortable and abrupt and jarring and abrasive from a mechanical standpoint. There is a hook to it where there is a very Mass Effect kind of feel to it, like this is my Arthur, right? Kind of like this is my Shepard was for Mass Effect, where my Arthur typically shoots first and asks questions later. Doesn't have a lot of tolerance for like giving people the benefit of the doubt, and isn't very forgiving. So I just had a chapter of the story where I met an old love whose family didn't particularly care for me, and now her brother is in trouble, having thrown in with a cult. And the woman's on the porch begging me for help, and I was like, nope, not gonna do it. And that's my version of that character. So there is a hook from that perspective, and there are good story trappings in it. From a gamer perspective, it's like the efficiency factor on it is so rude that I struggle every time to allocate like 8 hours, because literally I started this 8 hour swing at 3%. I'm at 13%, and that's not a good ratio for me. So, but like I said, I'm kind of splitting my perspectives where I'm like, I'll unpack it slowly a bit at a time, but mechanically it's not enjoyable.
Did you play the original Red Dead Redemption?
I did not. No,
oh, okay.
Yep. And this is, and this is part of the problem, very akin to Monster Hunter World, right? A lot of media heat around this that I think made a lot of people feel like the messaging on this was that this was a game that as a gamer you should play, right? But it's got issues, and I definitely could say, it's not for everyone by any means.
Okay, I was just wondering because I played a little bit of the first one, and I was pretty excited for this one, but after hearing like you and then just other people, just the way they talk about it, it's like it just seems like a chore. I mean, it seems like work more than like I'm not gonna have any fun with it.
Right, and what I hear from people is that actually the first one is a little more mechanically enjoyable, and it's a little more of a straight up action adventure, kind of an Infamous almost style game, maybe even more arguably closer to GTA than what it actually is.
Yeah, it's more gamey than just being so specific on everything. So,
all right, I think we probably should move on from Red Dead. We have a couple of other big titles that
we beat that horse to death.
that came out recently. We'll go with you, Prime. You played Crackdown 3?
Yes.
That just came out, right? Yes.
Finally got my hands on Crackdown 3. I've been waiting for this one. This was actually one of the reasons I got the Xbox One. 'Cause I heard, I had seen all the hype about this game from the beginning, even before, the Xbox came out, Xbox One. And I've been enjoying it. It's Crackdown. I mean, and saying that, that's not a bad thing. It reminds me a lot of the first one. Second one kind of veered off a little bit as far as the storytelling. There's zombies thrown in there, and I have no idea why. But mechanically, it was still kind of the same gameplay. But this one goes back to you're just a super cop. You're trying to take down a city. Pretty much the same as the same story as the first one. It seems to be a little bit more more people you could take down though. If I remember correctly from the first, it's been a while since I played the first one, but so you got like your major like 4 or 5 like big leaders, or in the first one it was gangs. This one now it's like a corporate people. But then underneath those people, you have, as you're running through the city and, running through the different sections of the city, you find their lieutenants and, their captains and stuff like that you have to take down. So that's, in that aspect, it's kind of cool. You have more than just like that one person you got to take down, and then, that's it. And then you move on to the next one. It's a little bit more, involved, sort of. I mean, you don't really have to do. There's not really a difference between, like a captain and, and a lieutenant. There's still like a gang of, underlings. You take them out, and then you have to get to the, the big boss or mini boss or, mid boss that you have to take out. But I mean, it's just fun. You get to run around the city. You're jumping and, super jumps, and, you can like run faster than, most cars there. Even though I think the vehicles this time handle a little bit better. Excuse me. At least that I remember from the first one. I really didn't like getting in cars at all. It just felt. The steering, I think it was mostly the steering on most cars just felt too like slippery and like floaty. You kind of turn a little bit and you're like spinning all of a sudden. Here, there's definitely a difference between the different vehicles that you can get, and every time you get a vehicle, it just automatically puts it into your garage. So you can call it up at any like waypoint or home base, whatever you get to. So but I've been having a lot of fun with it so far, and I'm definitely gonna keep playing it. I don't know if anybody else played it on here. It doesn't look like it's.
Yeah, I played a little bit. I got through the first, boss, whatever. I'm trying to remember what they're actually called, but lieutenants, right? So I had a chance to play it. I'm curious. After I didn't get to the point where I'm in vehicles yet. Do you feel like the gameplay is evolving, or does it feel like you're rinsing and repeating? I think that's been kind of one of the knocks thrown at it out there, is that it's relatively shallow. I mean, I agree with you. I'm actually really enjoying it. It is, there was one review that kind of just called it, maybe it was even IGN, but it was someplace that called it just kind of dumb fun. And it certainly, it fits that mold, right? That it is enjoyable to kind of pick up and play. It's potentially binge worthy in a Netflix type of model. It's not necessarily bad, but it feels kind of one note as well. And so I'm, as someone who really loved like Saints Row 4 and played through that on multiple consoles because of the open world aspect of it and the goofiness of it, do you feel like it's hitting the right kind of goofy notes and kind of superhero power aspect to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely getting that Just Cause type of feel from it. Just kind of wacky. Get in there and I mean, eventually, I'm sure I'm gonna get strong enough where I could just pick up a vehicle and start throwing it at the enemies. But I haven't got to there yet. But I think I'll get there eventually. They have the morphin vehicles in there too, which I believe they had in the first one, where the vehicles that you get from your police, whatever you are, police or government or whatever kind of super cop you are, when you get those vehicles, you can turn them into different things. I got a vehicle now that I can actually drive up buildings and stuff, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, there is a lot of rinse repeat in there, especially like I said with the taking out the enemies. It's it's nothing, as far as I can tell right now. There's no puzzles or anything I got to take care of. It's just beat up on the underling, like I said, beat up on underlings, and then get to the captain and lieutenant, or whatever the higher up is. So, but like I said, it's kind of just causey fun. So I'm having a great time for it right now. And just like the first one, you got to collect the orbs. So I'm always looking for the orbs in whatever area I'm in, trying to get as many as I can.
So let me introduce a question which I predict will become a classic on our show. Do you play this game if it is not on Game Pass?
I would, yes, just because I played the original, and like I said, it's pretty much like the first one as far as I can tell right now. So I would.
Okay, so without Game Pass, this is a $60 purchase for you.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
What about you, DB?
So I would say that I would totally be interested in playing this game, but I'd be waiting for that deep discounted sale, right? I'd come back to this at a holiday time when it's $20 or $15 or even $10, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had, and I'm enjoying what I've played. If you like that type of game, if Just Cause, if Saints Row, if the original Crackdown were games that you enjoyed, I think Prime is right. There's a lot of fun that could be had here. I have a hard time thinking that it's a $60 full price type of game. But I'm also incredibly cheap, so
You're incredibly wise. You're a wise shopper.
Did Crackdown in any form ever come to Games with Gold? For certain?
So in the last 2 months, Crackdown has been free.
Okay.
It's not necessarily been a Games with Gold game officially,
right? Yeah,
but it's been free since they had their December kind of expo show that Xbox did.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it had come. The original 360 one had come at some point, but I'm not for sure on that though. But I think just because I had been waiting for it for so long, even if I didn't have Game Pass, I would have definitely have bought it. So just because I like Crackdown.
All right. Well, we'll pivot from a game that is very glass half full to a game that's kind of been glass half empty, I think. DB, I think of the four of us, many of us played the demo, but you're the only one I think so far that's actually played the final release of Anthem. And in all the chats, it's like I can hear you like screaming to the heavens that you want to like this game, but it just doesn't feel like it's happening.
So I'll say that I like this game more than I have at any point in time that I've played it, but that doesn't necessarily make it good. When we talked about it after the demo, right? Like we talked about how when you and I and two other guys played it as a squad, we had a blast. The dynamic of combat was really fun. The ability for all of us to kind of be jumping back and forth and using different ability combos and hearing that pop when we actually got a primer and a detonator to work, even if we didn't know what those things were at that stage. Reviving people, the flow of combat, our excitement, or at least our enjoyment around that is still there. Last Friday, I got on with somebody that we had played the demo with and did a couple missions and had a really good time within the act of playing the game. And I think that's the piece for me, is that playing the game is actually really fun. The rest of the stuff around the game needs a lot of work. And I think rightfully so that this game has been glass half empty or glass with a leaky side. I think that there is a lot of things in this structure that are questionable in terms of game design, and whether it is the amount of loading screens that you have to get between each different type of activity or loadouts, and being able to, much has been made about how you change your weapons or the lack thereof, or you picking up a new loot but you can't see what it is until you go to the forge, which is after the mission's done, but then you can't test it back out until you go back out, and then you have to, right? I mean, there's all kinds of design aspects here. And as I was talking about within the lore, there's a ton of potential within the story. Within the 8 hours that I'm into on Xbox and the 4 hours that I'm into on PC, I am more invested in the lore than I am the story of the game. I've heard that there's a few characters later on that get a little more interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's just some things that feel kind of, I don't know if it's an older design model that sure, the Normandy of people waiting around for you made sense in the 360 age, but whether that still fits here. One of my early concerns about this game was the first person perspective in the storytelling aspects, and how there's not a lot of I'm a lot more interested and connected to the world than I am to my character at this point. So, I think in some ways that this is going back to what Agasicles was saying. There are a ton of mechanical gameplay decisions and structures in there that are not explained, that are things that I've had to go outside of the game to figure out. potentially they could be fixed and patched, and I got to give credit to BioWare that they are. The game I played on the 15th with EA Access, was not the same game that had the 4 gig patch, 5 gig patch, had multiple patches. Now, that it's the game continues. There are menus that are different from a week and a half ago, right? I mean, there is strange. Yes. So
can I ask you a quick question
please
on that?
stop me. Yes.
Well, a lot of your commentary is focused on like there's potential, like you use the word like 15 times in the Picks place, potential, right? I'm kind of sitting here thinking like, you're saying how their BioWare is working really hard on it, and they're changing menus, they're tweaking this, they're tweaking that. They threw in, I know that one of the big news items from the demo was like a social hub area or something, and it just almost makes me feel like, why did they release the game now? Like, it's not as if it released in November and they had to get it out there for the holiday rush or anything like that. It's February. We have months of relatively quiet. Like what big games are coming down the pike that Anthem was going to have to really compete with, or that they may have been afraid to go head to head with? And it's just, you almost wonder, would it have benefited them to go ahead and just delay it 3 or 4 months and put a little bit more polish on it? Because now it's like you stumble out of the gate, and it's designed to be a long tail game. So why would you put, like make a bad first impression?
I think that is an interesting discussion, and at some point there will be a post-mortem about this where somebody can actually discuss it. Yeah, I think, whether it is, how much of this is publisher dependent and EA wanting to get something out before the end of the fiscal year in March, how much of this is that it was initially, even the messaging when it was not delayed but just moved back on the calendar from fall, was not about it being delayed. It was about it being pushed back for a more opportune window. But yeah, I think certainly more time in the oven could have been beneficial. I say this as, and I want to put this caveat out here so that, I say this as a week 1 Destiny player, as a Destiny beta player, that, I remember having to go outside the game to get things explained to me. I remember doing loot chest runs. I remember shooting into, a spawning area, right? There are all kinds of poor design decisions in Destiny when it launched that people moved through, right? There were not waypoints. You had to go to get a Destiny public event tracker app to figure out when those world events were happening. There's world events within Anthem. There's no notification of in-game with them, but we survived that with Destiny. Whether it is a matter of this game came out after people had higher expectations, or that people were more willing to give something the benefit of the doubt, but now, after multiple iterations of games as a service needing to be built as the plane is flying, yeah, I think it could have benefited from more.
Yeah,
yes, exactly right.
This might be wrong. I feel like I heard a slight apology embedded in there. And Destiny was 3 years ago, right? Like,
Destiny was 2014.
You're right. Absolutely. So 5 years ago. I would have thought that they would have learned. Like, I can't give them a pass for that. And as far as I can tell, reading the tea leaves, and again, from a purely observational aspect, and I'm sorry, this game is not tickling my bits enough for me to go drop $60 for the experience. I rely on you and what the other games journalists are writing about it. As far as I can tell, both Destiny and Destiny 2, upon initial deployment, were still in overall better shape than this is. So, yeah, I just, and again, I struggle to understand why I mean, I know why you're playing it, right? Because you're trying to you're diligently trying to turn over more of the soil to see if there's actually, some more arable land underneath the dung pile. But it's a slightly separate topic. But like, I still fail to So I don't want to get into the streamer stuff because that's different. But even still, just from a multiplayer aspect, like I struggle to understand why people insist on playing this game, this and other games that are bad games, simply to play with their friends. And I remember being on the 360 and like we didn't spend a lot of time playing bad games, right? Like we sought out the good games and we played the good games with our friends. So this whole aspect of like how people so need the social aspect that they're willing to spend time in bad, broken, poorly designed games when there are better options, I fail to understand. Maybe it's the Iron Man aspect, kind of like you mentioned in Flop Chat earlier in the week.
It is. I mean, I think the act of playing the game is smooth. It is enjoyable, right? When you're out in the world, flying around and comboing with other people, that's a whole lot of fun. There's just not enough of that for me at this stage to make up for the rest of the faults in terms of how things are designed at this point in time.
All right. We're coming on in an hour. Actually, all of my games I've talked about on previous episodes because that's the type of gamer I am. So I don't really have too much to say. I guess the primary game I'm chipping away at right now is Octopath Traveler. And I continue to say like the Fairy Tail game is an excellent and being on the Switch, excellent game for bedtime. So I did fall asleep the other night with it, and I think I accidentally hit the A button a few times, so I missed some of the story. But I was able to come back to it and check the log to see what was going on. But no, the music and everything is great. The more I play the game, the more I'm falling in love with it. So, and I bring that up because there was an article this week, if we kind of segue into a little bit of our new show, talking about Square Enix having they're predicting, or not predicting, but they have it set up where later on in the year they're expecting additional revenue. So everybody's like, okay, there's going to be a game they announced probably around E3 time for later in the year that we don't know about yet, that they're expecting to sell well. And within that article, though, they did talk about these AA titles that, they're not designed to appeal to every gamer, but the gamers that like them really like them. And I hope they're planning on continuing to double down on that strategy. So, with your Crackdown 3s, that might not be everybody's cup of tea, but like Prime said, I'm having fun with it. And, for me, Octopath Traveler kind of fits that mold. I might be a little bit like DB in that I don't know if I'd pay $60 for it, but I didn't. So I got it on New Year's Day sale, and I think that was probably a pretty good deal. But yeah. So if you like old school RPGs, you need to pick it up. All right. With that, we're past an hour, so let's go ahead and do next fortnight's Picks Plays assignment. We're gonna continue the story and lore theme, but we're gonna take a look at it from a different perspective. Not from so much a does this enhance the game perspective, like the entire world and lore, but specific lore. That is, we're gonna look at how games utilize DLC to enhance the experience and keep people playing. Obviously, for games like competitive games and multiplayer games, map packs, or your destinies, your season passes, all that stuff we understand. We understand why the DLC works. you're always thirsting for new content. The game is built around that aspect. For single player games, however, DLC is available, but if you have a story arc, where does the DLC fit in? Does it work to be tacked on later, like as an epilogue? Does it work as perhaps? I think that Wolfenstein 2 had DLC packs where you explore secondary characters, or I know for Horizon Zero Dawn, the DLC is set within the timeline of the game, but before the game actually ends. So it's kind of like in the middle. You could have gone off on this tangent, but you follow the main storyline. You didn't. So there's a couple of different strategies. I'm just kind of curious, does single player DLC work? Does the game actually get enhanced? And is it fun, or is it just kind of a money grab for people that just are, just thirsty for more of a game? So DB, you have none of these are binding, but everybody put in an idea that they might want to pursue. What's yours, DB?
So mine is the Legacy of the First Blade from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So this is the kind of first. It's 3 episodes out of the DLC, the season pass. It's one story arc, and it's gotten a little bit of, not even a little bit, for within Assassin's Creed, it's gotten a decent amount of controversy because of some forced story decisions that it did within the second episode. So the 3rd episode comes out later this week, and I'm picking up the season pass to be able to play through them. The patch that came out for Assassin's Creed actually today made some dialogues changes in that controversial piece. So I'm curious to see what that brings to the table.
And Prime, we alluded to this earlier in the show, but you're going to pick up Skyrim?
Yes, so there was 3 major DLCs that came out for Skyrim originally. Dawnguard, which was like a vampire storyline, which is fairly short. You can either pick the Dawnguard, which hunts vampires, or vampires, obviously trying to take down the Dawnguard and take over Skyrim. There's Hearthfire, which is a smaller thing, which is more just gameplay stuff. You can build houses and you can adopt children and stuff like that. But the one I'm gonna do, which is the very last one, which is Dragonborn, and that actually placed a whole new. There's kind of like an island that you get to go to, and a fairly large one. So I played very little bit of it on the 360 when it originally came out, and I'm looking forward to getting through it and just kind of going through the story a little bit more. And this is not a spoiler because it's part of the write-up, but you're basically going up against the very first Dragonborn and trying to defeat him and trying to get wonder why he is coming back and trying to take over the land. So and like I kind of mentioned earlier, I didn't pick this originally just because there's so much you can do in this game as far as lore. There's like tons of books that you can read through, and I actually started doing that at one point on the 360, and it took over my life because there's literally books of just pages and pages and pages of stuff you can read through. So, but I'm looking forward to finishing and going through and finishing the Dragonborn DLC.
I have chosen Horizon Zero Dawn: The Frozen Wilds. Horizon Zero Dawn was, I don't remember if I picked that or Zelda as my game of the year last year, but they're both right up there. So I've been waiting for an excuse to pick up the DLC, and this is it. This is a case, I think, where it's set before you complete the game, and I think it pretty much opens up some side quests in kind of the northern areas of the map. So Zeus, what'd you pick? Sorry, Gascles, what'd you pick?
No, that's fine. And I'm not completely settled on this pick. One question that I wanted to ask. So I'm looking through. So everybody is picking a thing that equates to what we used to refer to as an expansion pack. Is that accurate?
Some type of story-based DLC.
Yeah, because I think that's the most interesting thing about this is that what the kids today think of as DLC, they don't. I'm surprised that a lot of them just don't understand that. Like, there used to be this notion of like you would complete a game and its story, and then they would give you like this thing that was like another 3 chapters, and you could actually physically go into the store and buy it in a box. And then Steam came along, and you could download those things. But like what we've smushed the notion of an expansion pack into this overall umbrella term DLC, and it's starkly different from a lot of the other things that get called DLC. So I think that's part of what's interesting about this. For right now, I've tagged the Whistleblower DLC for Outlast, because inherently the easiest thing to go after is an expansion pack of something that I've actually completed. But as we know, I don't complete a lot of games. So Outlast has been one that's been in another circle of discussions recently. So I remember that it is a thing that I finished that has DLC. I am quite honestly going to desperately search for something else. But this may have to just be like the target that does present itself.
Anytime you use the term expansion pack, all I think of is the N64 memory expansion.
Well, the thing that's funny, I've been meaning to talk about. So my first experience with Command & Conquer was actually through an expansion pack, because Command & Conquer, I think Tiberium War was actually an expansion pack to like CNC 3 or something like that, and that was my first experience with Command & Conquer. So,
all right, I think that should about wrap it up. Agascles, do you have any plugs for the rest of the network?
So Peter Moore and I just recently taped an episode of It's Another Thing Movies, reviewing Godzilla 3 Planet Eater, so the final chapter in the recent Godzilla anime series that has been going on, that is billed as a Netflix original, but isn't really, but kind of is. So if you're a big Netflix fan, that's primarily what we cover, so you can check that out. We will be next reviewing Triple Frontier, which is a new Netflix original movie starring Ben Affleck, which drops on the 13th of March. So be on the lookout for that. In the middle of the month, the It's Another Thing crew and I are trying to figure out when we're going to get back to wrap up our review of season 2 of The Gifted. And we, What's Your Issue keeps going every week. So I've got to post this week's episode, but this weekend we'll be taping the next episode of The Stream Cave. And right now it looks like that topic will be covering the notion of becoming a full-time streamer. So that is sure to bring us a lot of irritation and ire on our thoughts on that. So we'll be taping that Sunday night on a live show. We're shoving it to the left to accommodate one of the co-hosts' personal schedule, and hopefully that will be available next week.
Awesome. All right. I think that'll do it. Thank you all for listening. This has been episode 82 of the Enough to Keep Going GX show. Next Tuesday night, one subset, 3 of us will return, not sure which 3, to do the E2KG Deep Dive, our new show. So have a good night, everyone.